Welcome to another edition of Dolphins in Depth, the Miami Dolphins podcast brought to you by the Miami Herald. I'm your host, Miami Herald columnist Omar Kelly, and right now I'm bringing you some of my favorite guys on the podcast platform or the social media space. Let's bring them up to the stage. First off, we've got Dougley Durong, who is one of the best Dolphins podcasters. I call Dougley, he is basically the pro football talk of the Dolphin space. He's in the far right, in the corner, down this direction. Well, yeah, we've got Josh Houts, who is my lifeline. When I was doing I Am Athlete and traveling basically United States, primarily on Sundays, he was my connection to what was happening in the Dolphins world. He's also got a podcast, another Dolphins podcast, and I think you're an invaluable asset. I think you almost won the beat writer honors. Did you make it to the semifinals?
I don't remember. I had no business being in that.
And then we've got Big E. He has been awarded the Dolphin Fan of the Year. What year was that, Big E?
2020, the first one. Yes, sir.
2020. He was the first one. He's got the Dolphins. Is it Dolphins Talk podcast?
DolphinsTalk.com with Mike Oliva. Yes, sir.
Dolphins Talk podcast. And I want to humbly apologize to you for taking a shot at you on QAM. You were just the most popular fan, but it's true. Fans know the schedule before the media does. They somehow, some way, they get it leaked. I thought it would be you, but it wasn't. But
all good.
Yeah, this is basically my attempt to do what I used to do in another podcast, in the All Dolphins podcast, which is a podcast roundtable. My first attempt, touching base with the fan base in regards to a couple of things that have happened in the past few weeks. Let's start off with the schedule. Now, from a fan's perspective, or even you could talk about Mike McDaniel's perspective, there were two issues that were brought up with the schedule. One, the fact that most of the 1:00 games were against Florida teams or teams with hot climates. And then the difficult close, the dismount, in terms of the tough December and January games that could present some challenges. But as Mike McDaniel says, hey, if you want to kill a narrative, this is your opportunity. And we all know that the Dolphins have a narrative where they don't play well in December, and they certainly don't play well in difficult climates. Dougley, how did you take the schedule?
So at first, when I looked at it, I didn't. The first thing I always look at for the schedules was the bye week. And we got an early one, and I think it had to do with the Taylor Swift concert being in the stadium around that time, which, of course, that's going to affect the world, apparently. But like the first half of the season is a nice schedule. I noticed that the most road games we have back-to-back are 2. There's a good influx and ebb and flow to the schedule. A lot of people don't like that last 6 games. I love it. Because
really?
as a great man once said, to be the man, you got to beat the man. So, I don't want to be limping into the playoffs.
Don't say a great man. That's Ric Flair, baby.
Woo!
Woo!
I don't want to be limping into the playoffs. I don't want to we beat these bum teams and we still got that narrative. We can't beat the good teams. Give me these guys. But again, also a lot could change because will Aaron Rodgers be there December 8th? Will he be healthy? What is there a sophomore slump with CJ Stroud? What is Houston going to look? What is Cleveland going to look like? Deshaun Watson. So as of right now, looking at it, it's a hard stretch of 6, especially cold weather in Cleveland and New Jersey. But I like it. Give me the hard schedule. Let's go. Let's like Mike McDaniel said, let's shut down the narrative. Let's go play in the cold, win the games, and win the division.
What's your favorite thing about the schedule, Josh?
Yeah, my favorite thing, for me, it's always getting to see them on primetime, right? For as bad as they've been on primetime, I enjoy just getting to, sit there and see the Dolphins in front of the lights and to see how they play and perform. So to see them get 5 primetime games to almost, feel like they deserve that was nice. But for me, like Doug said, the first thing I noticed was that week 6 bye, and I was like, that seems a little bit too early to me. But, some of those later ones we've had have never really worked out. To me, it's all going to come down to those last few games of the season. And I just hope the Dolphins can, exercise the demon, right? And can do something that we haven't seen him do for 20 plus years. I want to see Tua and that team just, not fall apart and to close things out and to, have some momentum going in the playoffs. So that's my biggest fear is those last few games. But like he said, you got to beat the man.
Takeaway. What's your biggest takeaway, Big E?
My biggest takeaway is, and I think this may have been strategic. I don't know. I think the coach may have asked for an early bye week, and here's why. You got two really stellar players on defense who are looking to come back from injuries probably right around that bye week. I know some people have been talking about miraculous recovery for Jalen Phillips, but if you can get Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips back after week 6, then that schedule in the back end doesn't really look as hard because you're getting it's almost like signing free agents in the middle of a season. And we don't know how they're going to react or how their body is going to react when they do come back. But my thinking is too, when we looked at the schedule last year, there were some teams like the New York Giants that were playoff teams. There were question marks with the New England Patriots. Some folks in the media thought that the Patriots were going to be really good last year. And that didn't end up happening. So I think when you look at it this year, when you look at the schedule this year, and everybody says it's hard towards the back half of this, you don't know.
You don't.
2 or 3 of those teams may end up stinking, putting a fat egg on the whatever.
Last year, we had the hardest strength of schedule going into the season.
Correct.
And then we ended with the easiest, and the biggest narrative was we can't beat the hard team. So like you said, Big E, you never know, man.
Nah, you don't.
Yeah, I've seen this. I remember the 2016 season. I think they had one of the toughest schedules in the NFL when it came to strength of schedule. But then when they got to the field, every quarterback was sidelined by injury. You just absolutely and people say, oh, that's the only reason they made it to the playoffs. And I agree with you guys. You just absolutely never know from a schedule standpoint. The Taylor Swift concert, Ugly Do Wrong, you might have a great point there. But also, Big E, you're right. I will say this, after watching the first week of the OTA practices, the one takeaway that I left was that massive limp that Jalen Phillips is walking with. That says to me, all these people who think that he's going to start the season healthy or active, no, sir. Now, I know there's a while before we start to play games, but an Achilles injury, if you think about Nick Needham and how long that road back was for him. And I know Nick Needham doesn't have the physical body of Jalen Phillips, and I'm not going to say he doesn't have the work ethic, but we all know Jalen Phillips works like a beast. But I think that's a little bit aggressive to say that he's going to be ready for the season opener. And I say the same thing with Bradley Chubb. So you make an excellent point, Big E. Here's
the other thing too. I know you're going to turn and no one really, we haven't. I know we might talk about the New York Jets, but who knows how good the New York Jets are going to be? And let's be honest, they have to go through a gauntlet after the first week. It's going to be Aaron Rodgers, who hasn't played a football game in well over a year, against the San Francisco 49ers, who have one of the best defenses in the National Football League. Who knows what he's going to look like? And we got the 2 Jets games after the bye week, after week 6. So again, expectations are they're going to be great, but who knows? Who knows if Aaron Rodgers is the same Aaron Rodgers from 5 or 6 years ago? There's some great questions. Anyway,
I also love the early Buffalo game. I know it's at home, and so you eliminate the 1 o'clock advantage. I think that's the biggest issue is you don't have that many 1 o'clock advantages. But I'm sure the rest of the league loves that. There's this mythology that everybody gets to make one request in terms of how they want their schedule, and the NFL will try to oblige by it. Certainly, more than enough teams said, "Yeah, we don't want to play Miami at 1 o'clock before November." So the league knows it puts them at a competitive disadvantage. Let's address some of the talent that was added to this team, either through free agency or the draft. I'll start out by saying I predicted the apocalypse was coming. And certainly a lot of fans will look at this roster and say, oh, well, they improved. I don't know what you're talking about. But I will say they improved at certain areas, especially watching OTAs. I think they drastically improved the tight end. They improved at wide receiver with the addition of Odell Beckham and the two rookies. And then they probably improved at inside linebacker. But every other area on the team, from safety to defensive tackle to maybe even the offensive line, and I don't mind what they did on the offensive line. Every other area, I don't know if you necessarily addressed it to a satisfactory level, either with the draft or free agency. And then we go to the defensive line. Is the addition of Chop Robinson, Shaquille Barrett, and Mohamed Kamara enough for the edge setters. Dudley, you think they did enough?
To a certain extent, like you said, I think they added. I wouldn't say they got better. I think they're still the same. Which, if that's the case, the defense wasn't too bad last year. I think a lot of it had to do with schematic things. But
that's a great conversation right there. Yeah,
that was for you, Omar. But I think there's still some areas that worry me. Defensive tackle, interior offensive line. I'm not sold on Brewer. I understand that Brewer's a very good run blocking center. I wish, Connor Williams did not get hurt and he came back to the Dolphins. I think that would have been fantastic. And also the safety position, if Weaver runs the style of defense that McDonald ran, or even Wink Martindale or Rex Ryan, like if he takes an amalgamation of the three, he'll probably be running 3 safety sets. So I don't know if I feel comfortable with anyone behind the starters. I know Nick Needham is probably going to transfer back there and stuff. There are some really good safeties still out there. So that's, another conversation with the money that's coming on June 1st. But I think that they're still the same. I don't think they got better or worse, but I still think the loss of Christian Wilkins is the one that still hurts. I don't think Robert Hunt's hurts as much.
Yeah.
But I think Wilkins' loss is still the one that they're trying to figure out what can we do.
And trust me, they're not done. I watched OTAs, and I got to tell you, wasn't impressed. I know there are no pads. It's impossible to judge and evaluate offensive line and trench play. But when I saw Tier Tart, who is arguably the most accomplished, most established, probably the most talented of the defensive line additions. When I watched him 20 yards behind the rest of his team in doing wind sprints, and I don't know, maybe he had a tough practice, maybe he was dehydrated. I don't know what happened. And this was just one day. But when I saw that, I was like, ooh, this ain't good. I'm not sure this guy passes a conditioning test. And this is your best signing. So that is definitely an area that I think probably still needs to address. It's no secret that if the Dolphins don't sign Calais Campbell the week before training camp opens, or maybe a week into training camp after they take a good look at what they've got, I think you could be in trouble for this season. How do you feel about the moves that were made this offseason, House?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. And I do have to admit, I'm more of I think we're all kind of fans, and I try to, leave the homer out of it and try not to lean, positive, this and that. For me, I do really like the addition of Kendall Fuller. And I was going to ask you your thoughts on that because, no disrespect to Xavier Howard, but between the groin injuries, getting up there in age, I do feel like they got a nice, complement and replacement for Xavier Howard. But that secondary as a whole, I'm really trying to figure out what's going to happen there. Like Dudley said, they might be using 3 safeties. Jordan Poyer, no disrespect, but he's probably more towards the decline than being that, game-changing safety that maybe the Dolphins are expecting to be opposite Javon Holland. And then what can Nick Needham do? But I think we all agree they're still trying to fill that void next to Zach Steeler that Christian Wilkins left behind. And I joke they're just kind of throwing a bunch of sacks of potatoes. I think I posted an image from Five Guys, and it was the potatoes. And they're just throwing as many bodies as they can, letting them battle it out and see if anybody can be serviceable. And I do think maybe they're hoping that Anthony Weaver, right? Isn't that his specialty defensive line? Maybe he can pull one of these guys together and get the next Zach Steeler or next stud. But yeah, that would be the biggest hole in the defensive side. And then again, what are your thoughts on the secondary, Omar? Because you at least see Kendall Fuller out there. Do you see that?
The practice that we watched, he did not attend. He did not participate in, and neither did Cam Smith, and neither did Jalen Ramsey. Jordan Poyer, Javon Holland, they were out there, and it was interesting to watch them work together and try to create some synergy. But Fuller, everybody knows that. I'm sorry, Xavier Howard has been the best Dolphins player and the best talent, the best draftee in over a decade. Probably more accomplished than Rashad Jones. To think that you're not going to lose something there, and I know he hasn't stayed healthy for a full season in a while. I know he's getting up there in age, but Xavier Howard's still a ball hawk. What I think you get in Kendall Fuller is you get a better safety in zone coverage if that's what you plan. Because let's be real about it, Xavier's not a zone safety. Xavier's never been a zone safety, probably never will be a zone safety. He was a fish out of water last year. He made it work, but didn't necessarily have numbers-wise. Of course, they had pretty good seasons statistically, analytically, primarily because everybody was attacking Kader Kohu. So they didn't need to attack anybody else. But Xavier Howard's still one hell of a player, and I'm interested to see what Kendall Fuller can add. But in terms of depth, if Cam Smith or Ethan Bonner or one of these young guys doesn't step up, and I know who Nick Needham is, so I know Nick Needham's going to be a valuable key cog. Maybe Javon comes down and Nick is the deep free safety in this defense, because we know that's who Nick is. He's a very headsy, smart player. And you want to probably get Javon a little bit more active, closer to the line of scrimmage. Maybe they add another safety, and there's tons of them out there. But that comes into the question of how much do you want, how do you want to spend that Xavier Howard money you're going to get, 18.5. And we'll discuss a little bit of that later. What did you think, Big E, in terms of the talent that they added this offseason? I don't hear anybody talking about these rookies.
Well, and I'll tell you, first and foremost, I'm going to use your word, Omar. The capocalypse was not as painful as we thought it was going to be. We added a lot of players, but I think outside of the rookies, this almost reminds me, especially some of the guys that they got, reminds me of the Daniel Kilgore year, where you bring in some guys, they've had some injury history, they're older, right? But you need that because they're less expensive, right?
Yep. That's exactly
what's the risk. Daniel Kilgore, what did he last? 2, 3, 4 games, I think, with us for that first season. And that was his last season with us, if I remember right. But here's the other thing.
I think you're thinking about Josh Sitton.
They came in together. The two of them were together, right?
I think Kilgore lasted the majority of the season. It was Sitton who lasted like 4 games.
He was from Chicago, right? He was from the Bears, I think, and he came
Green
over.
Bay. I think he
was it Green Bay? Okay.
Yeah.
But he was older. He had some injury history. You brought him in, you paid him some money. But here's the other challenge that I see. And you already touched on Christian Wilkins. And I think the team strategy is right now, we're going to bring in like 25 defensive tackles, and one of them is going to take the spot, right? One of them is going to earn that spot of starting defensive tackle. So I think there's a lot of question marks there. As it comes to, from the rookie standpoint, I think you've built up some of the areas that you've already had some strength, and also those wide receivers, I think were clear needs that we had. Also, when you look at, I didn't think we necessarily needed a running back, but from who we got, it sounds like he could be the best running back of the draft from last year. And then on the defensive side of the ball, and of course, too, we got not Muhammad Kamara, but we got Patrick Paul on the offensive line. And I made that mistake when I texted you this morning, Omar.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Patrick Paul. Don't know what he's going to end up, because he's huge. He's a huge man, but as you mentioned this morning, through your observations, he's got work. He's got a lot of work that's going to need in order before he's actually able to put his feet on the ground. So I think there's a lot of development there. I think some of these guys are going to be thrown into the starting role, especially on the defensive side, on the edge side, because as you mentioned, the injuries are still going to be affecting. But I don't feel bad, because the majority of the offensive players are still there. Offensive line, do you really need to be that good if the ball is getting out of Tua's hands within a second and a half to 2 seconds?
You need to be good.
For the running game, absolutely, because that was something that they really did very, very well.
You got to be better than Lester Cotton, and this is no disrespect to Lester Cotton, because I think he did an admirable job filling in for injured players, but that's the baseline, and you got to do better than that. And let's hope, to me, the biggest concern that I have offensively is, okay, where does Liam play? And who's your backup center? Because I think that they're not done with the Liam investment, and I'm fine with that, because I think he can handle that right guard or maybe that left guard spot. Last year, we already saw that he wasn't better than Isaiah Wynn, but Isaiah Wynn has aged a season, so we don't know what he's going to look like. But then it's Liam, Jack Driscoll, who seems to be a nice pickup, but again, why is everybody out there for $1.8 million? 1 year, $1.8 million. That was the Dolphins special.
Times 20.
Yeah. And that's, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of Dolphin fans want to rub it in my face that the apocalypse wasn't as bad as you told us it was going to be. Well, you still took that same step back talent-wise that the Buffalo Bills took.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just the nature of how when your team handles itself financially irresponsibly, or has to pay a quarterback money. This is how you got to build your team. You got to sign old, age, inexpensive players. And if you look at with the exception of Fuller, Brewer, and Brooks, tell me anybody else on your roster that you added, and that includes Jonnu Smith, who got a decent amount of money. Tell me anybody else on your roster that you added that other teams weren't like, man, we got to go get that guy. It was all $1.8 million specials. And, hey, we'll see where that takes them. I think coaching is the great equalizer, and I have no idea which one of these players is going to look at this opportunity as a chance to cement himself as an NFL starter. So let's move on to the conversation to what everybody wants to talk about, which is, will Tua get his money, and how much money will it be? Let me set the tone for this conversation. I wrote in the Miami Herald. I had an agent friend of mine who I've relied on for over a decade, who's very good at his job, especially when it comes to the money. He proposed to me a contract that he said the Dolphins can't deny, and Tua and his camp can't deny. One, the contract gives him $170 million in guaranteed money. The contract puts him in the Joe Burrow, puts him right over the Joe Burrow stratosphere when it comes to contract size, but fake money. But then when it comes to the real money, there's a 4-year commitment to Tua at $42 million a season. And he'll arguably take this because he's going to be guaranteed $170 million. And what my agent friend tells me is there's no way Tua is going to turn down $170 million, especially when it's guaranteed, even if he's playing at $42 million a year. Now, complicating this is the fact that a comparable quarterback in Jared Goff got $50 million or 53. I can't remember exactly what he got. But that's complicated. He got $53 million in AAV, which is average per year. But that's really the fake numbers and the fake money. As if you followed me for a while, guys, I only count what the real money is.
Yep, guarantees.
And do you think that this deal gets done if Tua walks out with anything less than $50 million a year in terms of fake money? Dudley?
No, I think, you look at the way he has gotten better every year, and this is a lot. It's funny because, there's the negative, narratives on Tua that, can't beat the good teams, even though it's a team sport. You can't play in the cold, even though it's a team sport. It's like all of these different narratives are put on just Tua, but he has a laundry list of things that he can now say to, the Dolphins, Stephen Ross and Chris Greer, like, this is why I should be paid $50+ million. This is why I should be paid around or more than Jalen Hurts, because I led in the passer rating 2 years ago. I led in yards last year. I've stayed healthy for you. I'm trying all these different things. I'm getting better. My, pass per yards have gone up. All these things gotten better every year. Past 2 years, playoff experience, even without me on the field, there's a lot that he can come at the table now and say, you see guys getting paid for more. The one who messed it up the most is Daniel Jones. The Giants paying Daniel Jones all that money. Everyone's like, I am so much better than Daniel Jones.
But that was $40 million a year. That was a couple of years ago.
So I am like 10 times better than Daniel Jones. So I should be getting that much more. And you brought up that contract that the agent, and it instantly reminded me of Jalen Hurts' contract, because his average salary, which again I learned from you always look at the total guarantees, is $51 million a year. He will never see $51 million a year. That cap hit will never hit $51 million, because his potential out is after 2027, and in 2027 it's $41 million is his cap hit. But last year was 6, this year's 13, next year's 21. They have it structured in a way that, like we talked about, that they can still build around him and still have a certain amount of time. So if I'm Tua and they come at me with a, Jalen Hurts type contract where they're like, we're going to offer you $55 million, you'll get $180 guaranteed, this, and that. It's like, how do you say no to that? But you know for a fact people are going to see that and say he's getting $56 million a year. He doesn't deserve that. Instead of just looking at the guarantee, the structure, the out, like it's just easy. But yeah, they structure it right, which Brandon Shore and Chris Greer are very good at doing structuring contracts.
Are they?
How do you say no? Well, I like them. Like the past few free
oh
agents,
man, these void years. Oh, they create so
now,
many
yeah, what
problems
they
for me.
did this year, it's kind of like you kind of hurt us a little bit there.
You're gonna hurt eventually. Yeah. Josh, how do you think this fan base? Because it's funny that the fan base to me is split. Half of them say pay Tua, get him up there with his peers, and then another half says make him play on the 5th-year option. Christian Wilkins play on the 5th-year option. He'll survive. Make him prove himself and franchise tag him the next year. If you're the Dolphins, do you play hardball with Tua?
No, I don't think the Dolphins do. I mean, I can understand why fans are saying this. I mean, myself included. I mean, we sit here and talk about some of the things he's going to use, in the contract negotiations, Pro Bowl starter, leading the league in passing. To me, honestly, it's great and stuff. But for me, as a fan, I just want to see the next step, right? You want to see them win the AFCs. You want to see them win a playoff game. So I can understand why fans are saying, okay, go out there to prove that last year wasn't a flash in the pan. But as we're sitting here talking, it just seems like the perfect storm for Tua Tagovailoa and his side, with him leading the league in passing, with Jared Goff just making that much money. I mean, I don't think your original question was, will he take, what was it, like $43 million a year? I think I wrote down, or $42 million a year with the 170 guaranteed. I don't know that he would, because it looks like every contract, one after another, I know you said the annual doesn't matter, but it does seem like they're all going up, with every new deal. So Jared Goff
the deal I'm proposing gets him in the 50 million club.
Okay. Let's do it then. Let's do it.
Yeah, and potentially he could make $50 million. I mean, these quarterbacks, they get their contract restructured all the time.
Yeah.
The only guy who hasn't gotten his contract restructured is Dak Prescott. And as you know, he's like making $26 million this year. Remember 4 years ago when Dak Prescott was like the highest paid quarterback in the NFL before Patrick Mahomes got his deal? And everybody's like, oh, that money's ridiculous. Well, Dak Prescott's making $26 million. That's how much the price of quarterbacks has gone up drastically.
Ridiculous.
In a 4-year span where, and I think it's going to continue to go up because you got Trevor Lawrence, you're Jacksonville, you're between a rock and a hard place. What are you going to do if you don't sign Trevor Lawrence to a $300 million deal? And he's clearly not going to want to move on. And then you got Dak Prescott, who clearly, has the Dallas Cowboys between a rock and a hard place, and no trade clause, no franchise clause. So that means he makes it through an entire season healthy. He's going to hit free agency with no restrictions, and you're going to finally see outside of Kirk Cousins what the market pays a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So,
True.
Big E, how do you handle the Tua situation?
I think you pay him, and I think you structured as everybody has been talking about, where there are some incentives involved, and I think the team has been built with the weapons that really help build or help focus on his strengths. Throwing the ball up to Tyreek, I think that's any quarterback's dream, to be honest with you, to have one of the top 5 wide receivers in the National Football League. And then to have that with Jalen and now with Odell Beckham Jr. I think the Dolphins need to go into the negotiating table and say, hey, we're going to continue to make you look good, and we want you to continue to improve as you have shown the last couple of years. But the interesting thing, I'm going to take you back to 2015, because this feels very similar. And I know social media wasn't as prevalent as it is today. Ryan Tannehill, when Ryan Tannehill got his contract, I would say a significant amount of the Miami Dolphins fan base were against it, because if I remember right, he was in that top 5, top 10.
I certainly was.
he was in the top 5, top 10 echelon of quarterbacks getting paid, right? And I think he was coming off. Yeah. And he was coming off of a winter season too.
Yeah.
And the fact was, guess what? The following season, he wasn't in that same echelon anymore, because now the next set of quarterbacks were getting their payment. And that's the same thing that's going to happen here. So Tua, I think, is going to get his contract probably before training camp begins. And I believe that he's going to be one of the top 5, top 7 paid quarterbacks in the NFL this year.
Yeah.
But then next year, and the year after that, when you have to re-up some other quarterbacks, he's going to drop down probably in the 10 to 15 range, just like we're seeing what's happening with Dak. That's just the way this process works.
Yep.
Absolutely. So people don't go crazy about it being 50 million, because guess what? Every year also, that money that the teams have that they can spend on their players continues to get up and up. Listen, we might be on this podcast in 10 years from now, and we might be talking about an $80-90 million a year quarterback, because that's the way this goes.
We will absolutely be talking about. I think somebody I know projected that it's going to be at $60 million in the next 2 years.
Sounds about right. Yeah, as much money as the NFL's making, as much as that ad revenue keeps coming in, sure.
Now that with the gambling revenue too, you never know. Here's my thing about the Tua situation. While the Dolphins, from a public perception, they're in a no-win situation because this is a dead period in sports and nobody has anything better to talk about other than will Tua get his money, and we all know how Tua does from a rating standpoint. They're also in a position of negotiating leverage, because when they didn't do it when they needed it, which was to create cap space, and had their offseason that they had, robbing Peter to pay Paul to build this roster. The fact that they built this roster without getting the cap space from Tua, because a new contract from Tua would reduce his cap number significantly in year one. That puts them in a position of leverage. The fact that he's going to make $23.2 million, which is twice as much as Christian Wilkins made, and the team put on a brave face when they couldn't get a deal done. They're like, all right, Christian, we support you, but, hey, your decision. If you want to go ahead to and play this year at $23.2 million and take on the injury risk, go right ahead. But you saw what happened to Connor Williams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he sat out too. He sat out. What was it? Not training camp, but he sat out.
He's out all OTAs and minicamp.
OTAs.
Cost himself $93 million making a political stand. And I wrote a column at that time. I was like, okay, you made your statement. Show up for the next 2 days and save yourself the Mercedes Benz.
93,000, not 93 million, right?
Yeah, 93. Save yourself $93,000. I was like, this is the price of Mercedes Benz. This is the price of a deposit on a home. Hell, you want to double down on it, show up the next day and then talk to the media. So, you make money doing that. But I think from the standpoint, we know where Tua is from an injury and durability standpoint. He's probably going to bet on himself.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry. If I put $170 million in front of Tua, no matter how that contract is structured, he's going to sign it. And this is a completely different ballgame than Christian Wilkins, because Christian Wilkins' whole deal is, I think, $114 million, and not all of that is guaranteed. The first 3 years is guaranteed. If you're telling me or any NFL player, I'm going to give you $170 million in guaranteed money, you would be insane not to sign that. From my perspective, the way this game is, no matter what position you play, the way this game is, it is not for long. And we all know that Tua has had some injury issues in the past. Now,
so I have a question for you, Omar.
Go ahead.
And this is regarding Tua, because you're saying if this contract is put in front of him, he should absolutely accept it. But here's the things that might be going through his mind too. He joined an organization where it felt like there was a head coach that wanted him gone sooner than later, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he's had to live through that. He's had to live through all the media scrutiny about this and that and the other thing.
He knows how the other side lives.
Exactly. So he may have that in his mind too, and say, listen, I need to get compensated for the pain and suffering that I dealt with the first couple of years that I was part of this organization, right? I mean, I know he's never going to say that.
Hold on, wait a minute. They also have taken care of him.
Yeah,
they fired a head coach because of him.
That's true.
But
it took a minute.
Huh? Yeah. No. It didn't take a minute. It took a very rough, difficult season, and probably nobody suffered more than Tua during that difficult season.
I agree. I think you're right.
But a coach came in, he nurtured you, he loved you, he built an offense that absolutely catered to your strengths. They went out and they got you tremendous amount of talent. Probably only the Eagles have more talent than you. And your career has taken off under this coach. You know how the other half lives.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to go learn another offense? And he's already said, Miami is my home. This is where I plan to raise my kids. I think they've got him at such a leverage point. If you deny the contract, then you're just staring at the franchise tag the next year. Collectively, that brings you to what? $66 million
Over 2 years. Yeah.
over 2 years.
Yep.
66, 170, 66, 107. And I think that's the position that the Dolphins have, which is why I personally don't believe that this deal gets done before the week before the regular season.
Really?
Do you think
and I also will predict that Tua does not play in the exhibition season at all. I don't without a new deal, I'm not stepping foot on that field. And would you if you were Tua?
Do you think the fact that he has athletes first as his agents is the reason why this is taking so long? Do you think if he had Drew Rosenhaus or somebody else, he would have been signed by now?
Absolutely not. I think athletes first, they have the majority of Dolphins. If you don't realize it, they had Christian Wilkins. They've also got Javon Holland. They've got these QBs. I believe Trevor Lawrence is not an athletes first, but and understand all of these agents, the quarterback agents, they work together. Trust me, Trevor Lawrence isn't getting a deal before Tua gets a deal because Trevor Lawrence needs Tua to raise the bar so that he can get over that bar. So they all work in concert. But athletes first is shaking them down. Really, really, really good. It's and I'll say this to you guys because you're a very educated group of media members. The Dolphins typically hitch their wagon to an agency. During the Tannenbaum era, it was not athletes first. It was, God, why can't I remember the agency? But the agency that had Sue. And that agency.
Is that David Malgetta? No, not him.
No. He's athletes first.
Okay.
So a lot of times certain specific teams belong to a certain agency, and that certain agency feeds them players. And I know everybody thinks Drew Rosenhaus is the agency, and that's not true. That's not accurate. Drew just has clients everywhere. I mean, Drew's got nearly 100 clients, so he's got a lot of clients everywhere. But this is an athletes first team right now, and unfortunately for Miami, they've got athletes first clients. So you're gonna get Tua. David Long is their client. Raekwon Davis was a client. Christian Wilkins was a client for athletes first. And right now you want to do business with them. You're gonna go through athletes first, and it's gonna be a little painful. So that's just the nature of the business. But let's talk a little bit more about money and finances, because the Dolphins are going to get $18.5 million when that Xavier Howard money clears. And so they won't have their belt as tight as it is right now, less than $2 million in cap space. They don't even have enough money to sign their draftees at the present moment, but it's coming. It's coming. 8 days, it's coming. What do you do with that $18.5 million? Obviously, some of it is going to have to be used. I think about $6 million of it is going to have to be used to sign your rookie class. But then you got $12 million staring at you. This organization has generally kept a breaking case of emergency fund. And I think that's going to remain to be there for the Jared Allens of the world in case something goes left in a situation in Washington, and you can go out and wind up and get yourself a very good player at a bargain in trade value. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor last year. They always leave some breaking case of emergency money.
You're going to need $10 million for Jay Cutler, by the way, just in case.
I thought it was 13. I thought it was 13.
For some reason, I got 10 million in my head.
Yeah, I think Jay played for 13.
Don't put that on us again.
Don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
What do you do, Dougley? Your Chris career, you instantly got $12 million in your pocket. What are you doing?
I'm going to Vegas. I would add two more. Two more. When the draft was over, I had three names that I was like, if the Dolphins add these three names, I think we're good going into the season. One was Odell. They did that. I'd like to add another safety, whether it's like Quandre Diggs or if it is Justin Simmons. If it depends on how much they're going to be, because the fact that they're still sitting out there is probably because they want more than anyone's really willing to give them. And I would add another interior offensive lineman, maybe Van Rotten or someone like that, just for depth. And again, we don't know who our backup center is, like you said. So it's like, I just want that addition there, or if not an interior offensive lineman, obviously a defensive tackle. And you brought up the possibility of trading for Allen, which is the rumors out there, whether it's true or not. And
they put my name on that rumor, and I was like, I never said that. I never said that.
I told Omar, I'm like, is this for real? He's like, no.
I never said that.
But that would be a huge move if they could do that. If they could bring him in, that would be, because Payne is going to cost too much. He already got a big fat contract. So if they could do that and then the other additions, then all of a sudden we're going into the season not really worrying about holes anymore, and we can compete. But again, it all depends on how much. We saw how free agency was. The biggest money we spent, I think, was Fuller's money. So it all depends. But they'll probably keep like 6-7 million just in case something does happen. Hopefully it doesn't. And yeah.
Josh, how you spending your $12 million?
Yeah, well, I think you pretty much convinced everybody that they should go get Calais Campbell, right? So I had his name written down. And like Dudley said, also Justin Simmons. But for me, and again, I'm not a doctor. I don't even know what the reports are right now on Connor Williams. But we're sitting here talking about how we maybe could use an interior offensive lineman. I always think about how good he was at guard, how good he was at center. I know there's rumors that he might not even ever play again. So Connor Williams, if he's not the answer. Dalton Risner was another name I think still out there that maybe the Dolphins would have interest in. So I think we all agree.
I think he's got beef with Butch. I think him and Butch Barry got beef. I think Risner was one of those guys celebrating Butch Barry's demise.
He didn't like the sticky notes.
Hey, listen, Butch, if there was a reclamation project award for careers, it was Butch Barry last year in terms of the Dolphins offensive lineman. Man, when I say I would have voted for him for MVP of the season, because if you saw what he was working with at the end of the season and that they made that work, that to me was just as important as Tyreek Hill's presence on the field, because Butch made a respectable offensive line out of some Spam and some Vienna sausages.
Hungry now.
Yeah. Oh, you fry up Spam. It fries up real well. How do you spend the money, Big E?
So I'm going to go opposite of you all, and I'm going to say we kind of need to take a step back, and because when you look at who is available, as you mentioned, it's either they're very expensive, or in Calais Campbell's situation, man's 38 years old, right? So do you want to bring on someone again where you've got such a high risk? I am of the belief, as I hit everything, I'm of the belief that you look at what other teams have extra in and watch who they're going to be releasing when the season comes up. And I know that's easy to say. And through all of the trials and, and anger that people had towards Brian Flores, I think one of the things that he did really well was identify talent that was being dropped from some of the other teams, and he'd bring them on board, especially that first year where it felt like half of our team was new every single week, right? Especially after they let Larry
and they throw him on the field. One of my favorite moments of my Brian Flores era was it was the year they were losing, and they lost like 7 games early in the season, and they claimed somebody, and Flores made the point, we can't just add this guy this week and put him out there on the field. And I said, but wait a minute, you did it all your first year. And he looked at me like, damn, you got me.
Well, and you talked about Nick Needham. Nick Needham wouldn't have had that chance had the opportunities not been there, right?
No. This is the interesting thing about Nick Needham, and this is where I realized, hey, there might be something there. Early in training camp of the Nick Needham era, this undrafted rookie was thrown in there as a starter, and it was based on performances. So yeah, he didn't make the initial 53-man roster, but they'd always go into the next day, the top performer got that starting spot, and Nick Needham had earned it like 5 times, and I was like, really? And so they always had a high opinion of Nick, who I call superstar. His mom blocked me because she thinks I'm mocking him, but it's really just it's paying homage to Nick that whole year that he had. I mean, where Flores said, what are you going to make this guy a superstar? To us, the media, and we're like, yeah, he won you the Colts game. Yeah, we're going to make him a superstar.
And I think that the thing is that you might have some gems there that you throw on the field. They can make things happen. Last year there was a big push to try and bring on board some other running backs, right?
Yeah.
And I kept saying, wait, We got
Yeah.
this young guy in the draft, Devon Achane, and I said it probably 5 or 6 times on various podcasts. I said, I like to see what he has.
Mhm.
And sure enough, the kid ends up being a bullet out of a gun.
Setting an NFL record for yards per
Exactly.
attempt. Yeah.
And I think there are players out there that will step up under the spotlight that you just need to give them that opportunity. Now, of course, they got to practice like that too in order to get those opportunities.
Devon did not practice like that. You know that, right?
I did hear that. Yeah. But for some reason, once he got on the field, the man was crazy.
It was man. We're infamously mocked in the media contingent because him and Savon Ahmed, they wore basically identical numbers. If you were looking at them, one is 26 and one is 28. You can't see the 6 or the 8.
Mm-hmm.
Even with binoculars, the only way we could tell them apart was that Savon wore orange shoes. And, even Devon said, yeah, when we're looking at coaches' film, that's the only way me and my teammates know who is who, because they have identical running styles. So Devon never tore it up in training camp. I think he was the 4th back, like all training camp. But man, when he got on that field, woo, that he was special. And I do hear what you're saying. I think the waiver wire, this is a year where I think you might need to rely on the waiver wire to supplement your team. Defense, they don't have enough defensive line. I can tell you that right now.
Right.
They don't have enough at safety. They probably don't have. You're one injury at cornerback away from that position being problematic. You need offensive line help. Who's your backup center? And
Liam.
You made a great point. I think it was you, House. Connor Williams. We've asked. We've tried. It looks like he's retiring. I don't know if he took an injury settlement. I don't know if he took injury insurance, and it would be better. This is just me thinking out the box. I do not have any confirmation, but guys put like $1 million on themselves, betting on their future earnings, just in case they suffered an injury. And it might be better financially for him to have ended his career, never play football again, than go out and actually try to redeem himself and get back on the football field. And sometimes this is a business decision. I don't know what's happening there, but I can promise you something is definitely happening. From a defensive line standpoint, and this gets into my final segment. I want each of you guys to tell me the one thing the Miami Dolphins need to do to be that Super Bowl contender. And I can tell you right now, and I know I've only looked at one OTA practice, but I've gone over and watched the film of every single player that they've added. Neville Gallimore, Deshaun Hand, Tier Tart, Benito Jones, Isaac Mack, Leonard Payne, Mario Kendricks. It's not enough. And if you think, and I said this on a tweet, and I stand by it. If you think that this defensive line is going to be able to effectively stop the run this season, you're asking for trouble. You're begging. And maybe Anthony Weaver can work miracles and magic, but this is not enough. And my hope is that they will address the defensive line somehow, some way. I think Calais Campbell, the fact that he knows Weaver, the fact that he knows this scheme, the fact that he was very effective in Houston. I don't know for certain that he wants to play. I know he ain't trying to participate in OTAs or minicamp. And I know he probably will not play for less than $6 million a season. But to me, that is a $6 million investment that I will make in order to save my season. Other than that, I'd be tremendously desperate. Dudley, one thing that you would do to ensure that this team is a Super Bowl contender?
For me, it's trenches. I'm big trenches guy, and I honestly think that they were so good on the defensive line last year, but they need to build off of that, and they need to continue that because they were so good at stopping the run, and it forced people to become one-dimensional on the opposite side, and they need to stick to that. And if there is a chance that you can go out and get someone like an Allen or somebody who you can instantly supplement, and all of a sudden your defensive line has not taken a step back, they need to do it because you're picking a time where it's the perfect opportunity, especially with the Buffalo Bills. They have Josh Allen still, who still makes them a good team. If the Buffalo Bills did not have Josh Allen as their quarterback, they'd be like a 5-win team this year.
Yeah.
So this is the time where if you can make something work and you can add players, whether it's the offense or defensive line in those trenches, you got to do it. Like, and if, the way you're talking about OTAs and stuff, and you can see it, that it's like you got something missing there, then Chris Greer has to see it too. And that's what I would do. I would worry about the trenches, give Tua the time to get to his second read so that narrative can go out the window. And also we got to get after the quarterback. You got to stop the run.
Yeah. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, hard to argue with that. I mean, I was going to joke that Calais Campbell wasn't he the one that took out Tannehill that one year, so he kind of owes us a little bit, right? But since you guys discussed the trenches, I'll go a different direction. Maybe go with safety. I think Dudley hit on it. This defense kind of needing more 3 safeties. It allows more versatility there. We know Justin Simmons is sitting out there, so try to go by. It's not my money. I think adding a
Hello, did we freeze?
I hear you.
Okay. No.
It's a good look.
Yeah, that's a good look. Where are you? How does everybody feel about Jamal Adams?
I was looking at him. He's younger. He's on the younger age. And
man, I have no idea what's happening. How do you feel about Jamal Adams there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's happening either. We're just going. Yep, here we go. I'm going to jump out now. Jamal Adams, certified, whatever. Go ahead, talkie Biggie, before it knocks one of us out.
No, I was just going to say Jamal Adams. He's younger. Although I almost feel like I see what's happening with Xavier Howard, where he got to the pinnacle of his career, and then he started taking some steps downwards. And I almost feel like that's what we've seen with Jamal Adams. But maybe different coach, different team, different players around him,
different opportunity. Because
I think might make him better. Yeah.
I think they need an in the box guy. I don't necessarily think they need a center fielder. I think they need an in the box guy. But who knows what's going to happen? Where are you? What is the one thing you would do, Big E, and to make this team a Super Bowl contender, to ensure that they're a Super Bowl contender?
I think we need to be able to change how we defend. And I say that because I think on the offensive side of the ball, Mike McDaniel he's going to continue to do a great job of scheming. So no matter who the players are, I think we're going to have success on the offensive side of the ball. On the defense, though, again, starting out the season without Bradley Chubb, without Jalen Phillips, you may have a hard time getting to the quarterback. So instead of a man-to-man coverage in the back end, you've got to be able to change that up. You got to be able to do some zone, not as much man-to-man, because the quarterback may have more time. I think we kind of all believe that if you don't have the edges getting to the quarterbacks, he's going to have more time. But then I think midway through the season, you could change things up if you got a healthy Bradley Chubb, if you have a healthy Jalen Phillips, and you've got to be able to change your system. And I know some coaches have a hard time going from one thing to the next because they're very stubborn and they're very set in their ways.
Or they have a hard time playing to the strengths of the talent that they have. Because
cover zero is the only thing I'm thinking about right now, right? Because that was like you just saw it every single week a couple seasons ago. So I think that's for me. Like, I don't think it's just one player, because I think that there are, as you mentioned, I think there are some spots where we have strengths. There's also some spots where I think we have some gaps, some holes. But if you scheme it up right, I think that can hide some of those weaknesses.
Definitely. Well, gentlemen, I always appreciate your time. Thank you for joining Dolphins in Depth. It's one of the first of many podcast roundtables we will have, and I'm thankful. The last time I did this, I had to have like 4 more because other podcasts just got in their feelings about it. But
but we're the first. We're the first.
Yes, we're the best.
Wait, we should put on like a poll. Who was the first Dolphins in Depth podcast with Omar, and we all get, we'll all be number 1. So I think that'll be good.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. I will do my best to relay to you the information that happens at OTAs next Tuesday and the weeks that follow. Be your eyes and ears. But thank you guys for watching Dolphins in Depth, and we will see you next episode.
Fins up, everybody.
Fins up.